Hey everyone, this is Jungkook. Before we start, I want to know where you're listening from. Drop your country in the comments below. I always love reading those messages and seeing how far these words can travel, how they somehow reach people. I will probably never meet in person, but still feel deeply connected to. It reminds me that even when we tell the most personal stories, they have the power to resonate with strangers across oceans. And today, I'm about to tell you something I have carried inside me for a long time. Something about Jimin, something real, raw, and unpolished. Something I thought I would never share, not publicly, not with cameras, not with the entire world watching. But here I am, ready at last. I think honesty has a strange timing in life. Sometimes you're not ready to admit things even to yourself. You bury them under layers of noise, music, schedules, tours, responsibilities, achievements, even distractions that look glamorous on the outside. But silence has a way of speaking louder than all of that. And in the quietest hours of the night, when the noise finally fades, that truth you've been hiding begins to echo so loudly inside your chest that you can't ignore it anymore. That's what happened to me with Jimin. I've shared stages with him, spent more hours of my life with him than probably anyone else outside my family. And yet there are truths about our bond that I never spoke out loud. People speculate. They always speculate. Fans write theories, the media guesses, strangers invent stories that don't even come close to reality. And for years, I just let it all happen in silence. Because sometimes silence feels safer than exposing your heart to judgment. But silence also has a cost. It distances you from your own truth, from the authenticity that makes relationships meaningful in the first place. 3 months ago, I hit a moment where all the achievements, all the noise, all the performances felt strangely empty. Don't get me wrong, I love performing more than anything. The stage is like oxygen to me, but even oxygen doesn't fill the void when what you crave is connection. I realized that no matter how many people scream your name in an arena, it means very little if you don't have someone to look at afterward and say, you know me, the real me. And when I asked myself who that person was in my life, the answer was immediate: Jimin. Let me take you back, because this isn't just about a sudden realization, it's about a journey. A journey through years of friendship, arguments, laughter, late night talks, tears nobody saw, and quiet moments that never made it onto any camera reel. It's about the truth that has been written slowly, one choice at a time, one sacrifice at a time, one unspoken word at a time. When I first met Jimin, I thought I knew what hard work was. I thought I was already giving everything. But then I saw him, the way he would practice a single move over and over until his body literally gave out, the way he would sing until his voice broke just to reach a note with more honesty, the way he looked in the mirror, not with vanity, but with the harshest self-criticism I've ever witnessed. It terrified me, honestly, because it showed me a kind of dedication that was both inspiring and painful. I admired it, but I also worried about him. And from the very start, I realized that our connection wouldn't be a simple one. Jimin wasn't just a teammate or a bandmate. He became a mirror. The kind of mirror that doesn't flatter you, but challenges you. Have you ever had someone in your life who sees through your excuses, who notices the details about you that others overlook, who pushes you even when you don't want to be pushed? That was Jimin to me. He had this ability to see when I was holding back, when I was pretending to be fine, when I was burying my emotions under a smile. And that kind of honesty can be both uncomfortable and life-changing. There were times when I didn't want that mirror, times when I wished he would just let me hide, let me be the version of Jungkook the world expected. But Jimin never accepted half-truths. He would call me out in private, sometimes gently, sometimes bluntly, and I hated it in the moment. But looking back now, I realized those were the moments that shaped me the most. I remember one night vividly. We were in a hotel room somewhere in the city. I barely even remember because tours blur together after a while. Everyone else had gone to sleep, but I was awake, scrolling through comments online, reading criticisms I knew I shouldn't read. Jimin walked in, saw what I was doing, and without saying a word, he just took the phone out of my hand. I was about to protest, but then he looked at me with this calm but piercing expression and said, "If you want to measure yourself, don't use the mirror of strangers. Measure yourself by what you give to the people who truly see you. That hit me harder than any comment ever could. I didn't say it then, but that was one of the first moments I realized that Jimin wasn't just my friend. He was something more. He was someone who could shift my perspective in ways I didn't know I needed. Over the years, our relationship has been tested. Fame tests, everything. It magnifies misunderstandings, stretches time thin, forces you to grow up faster than you're ready. There were arguments, loud ones, painful ones, times when we didn't speak for days, even though we were on the same stage. But the strange thing is, those silences always ended with reconciliation that felt deeper than before. Like fire refining metal, each conflict burned away illusions and left us with something more real, more unshakable. People often ask me what makes Jimin special. They expect me to talk about his voice, his dancing, his charisma. And yes, all of that is extraordinary. But the truth, what makes him special to me isn't the things everyone sees. It's the things only a few people ever notice. It's the way he remembers the smallest details about someone's day. The way he always takes the seat closest to the door in a crowded room because he wants others to feel more comfortable. The way he quietly supports others without needing recognition. It's the character behind the talent. And here's where the truth becomes difficult. Somewhere along the way, my admiration turned into something deeper. I didn't plan it. I didn't even want it at times because it complicated everything. But love rarely asks for permission. It sneaks in through the smallest cracks, grows in the quietest corners, and one day you wake up and realize it has been there all along. That's what happened with Jimin and me. Of course, saying this out loud is terrifying because love between friends, between brothers in arms, between people constantly in the spotlight is never simple. And yet, the truth has a way of demanding to be spoken, eventually. That's why I'm here today, telling you this not as an idol, not as Jungkook the performer, but as a person who can no longer carry the silence alone. The truth about Jimin is that he taught me what connection really means. That success without someone who truly understands you feels empty. That love, whether you name it friendship, brotherhood, or something more, is the force that gives purpose to all the rest. And that no matter how the world sees us, what matters most is the authenticity of what we've shared. This is only the beginning of the story I want to tell you, because the journey with Jimin is not just about one moment or one confession. It's about years of practice being the people we hope to become, practice showing up for each other, practice building something real in a world that often feels unreal. And over the next chapters, I'll share with you the memories, the struggles, the lessons, and the moments of silence that shaped everything between us. But for now, I want you to sit with this simple truth. Behind all the lights, all the noise, all the headlines, there was always Jimin, and there was always me. And the bond between us is the most important truth I've ever been ready to share with you. I ended the first part by telling you something simple but powerful, that behind all the noise, there was always Jimin and there was always me. But truths like these aren't born overnight. They are carved slowly, like rivers shaping rock, through countless moments that nobody else ever sees. If part one was the spark, then part two is the fire, the kind of fire that comes from struggle, misunderstanding, and the resilience that grows when you refuse to let go of someone even when it feels easier to walk away. There's a story I've never shared publicly before. It was during one of our earliest world tours, a time when exhaustion had wrapped around all of us like a heavy chain. Schedules were brutal, our bodies were screaming for rest, and yet the expectations only grew higher. I was still young, still trying to prove myself, still carrying this invisible pressure to be flawless. That night, I cracked under it. I broke down backstage minutes before we had to go out. And the one who found me wasn't a manager, wasn't a staff member, it was Jimin. He didn't lecture me. He didn't tell me to toughen up. He just sat beside me in silence, letting me breathe. After a while, he said something I'll never forget. Perfection is not what people remember. They remember honesty. Go out there and show them the honest version of you, even if it's messy. Those words gave me enough strength to walk on stage that night. And when the lights hit and I looked to my side, Jimin was already looking at me, not with judgment, but with reassurance. That moment became a blueprint for our entire relationship. Jimin as the anchor when I felt like I was drifting too far. But anchors can also feel heavy. There were times when his presence forced me to confront things I didn't want to face. Like the time we fought so badly that we didn't speak for nearly a week. The details don't matter. It was something stupid, something small, but pride made it grow bigger than it should have. On stage, we danced side by side like nothing had happened. But off stage, the silence was thick enough to suffocate us both. It was only when Jimin broke the silence sitting across from me in a hotel room, looking straight into my eyes, that the wall finally cracked. "You know," he said softly, "I'd rather fight with you than laugh with anyone else." That was his way of saying sorry. It was also his way of telling me that even conflict couldn't undo what we had. The truth about Jimin is that he never allowed distance to become permanent. He had this instinct to reach out, to repair, to heal, and I needed that more than I ever admitted at the time. Because while I looked confident on stage, inside I was often just a boy searching for belonging. Jimin gave me that belonging, not through grand gestures, but through small, consistent acts of loyalty. There's another memory that comes to me now, late at night when I replay the journey in my head. It was my birthday years ago. Everyone had celebrated earlier, but when the cameras were gone and the others had gone to bed, Jimin knocked on my door. He didn't bring expensive gifts. He didn't make a big scene. He simply placed a handwritten letter on my desk. Inside, he had written about the first time he ever saw me practice, how he had felt protective of me since then, how he admired not just my talent, but my heart. I never told him this, but I cried that night because it was the first time someone had written down exactly what I needed to hear, not what the world expected to say. Sometimes people ask if we're just friends or if it's something more. And the truth is, those labels have never mattered to me. What matters is that Jimin has been the constant thread in a life full of chaos. That when the spotlight turns off and the fans go home, there's someone who sees me not as Jungkook the idol, but as Jungkook the human being with fears, insecurities, and a heart that longs for connection. But here's the paradox. The closer you are to someone, the more power they have to hurt you. And yes, Jimin has hurt me before, not intentionally, but because love in any form makes you vulnerable. I remember one interview where he joked about me in a way that stung deeper than he realized. The cameras kept rolling, and I smiled, but inside I felt exposed. Later, I told him how it made me feel, expecting him to brush it off. Instead, he apologized with such sincerity that I couldn't hold the grudge even if I tried. That's the thing about Jimin. He doesn't just say sorry, he changes. He listens, he adjusts, he grows. And that's rarer than talent, rarer than charisma. Over time, I began to see that our connection wasn't just shaping me, it was shaping my art. My singing grew more vulnerable because I wasn't afraid to feel anymore. My dancing became more expressive because I knew someone beside me understood every movement without me needing to explain. My writing became deeper because I had lived through emotions I once tried to avoid. Jimin unlocked something in me that no amount of training ever could: authenticity. And yet, authenticity comes with risk. There were nights when I lay awake wondering, what if the world misunderstands this bond? What if speaking it out loud ruins everything? But silence was starting to feel heavier than risk. Because every time I hid the truth, I was hiding a part of myself. The truth about Jimin is not a headline. It's not gossip. It's not something meant for tabloids or theories. It's this. He taught me how to be brave enough to feel. And in a life where everything is staged, scheduled, and scrutinized, that bravery is the rarest gift anyone could give me. This is why I'm ready now. Ready to share the truth. Not for shock, not for drama, but because the truth sets you free. And the truth is that Jimin has been the single most defining relationship of my life. Not because of fame, not because of circumstance, but because of who he is when nobody's watching. I know some of you listening might be wondering what this means, what it changes, how it will affect everything moving forward. But maybe the lesson here is that not all truths are meant to change the outside world. Some truths are simply meant to free the heart that's been carrying them in silence. So here I am, freeing mine. And in the next part, I'll take you deeper into the quiet moments that shaped us, into the lessons Jimin taught me without ever meaning to, into the reasons why, after all these years, I can finally look into the camera and say, the truth about Jimin is the truth about me. The truth always arrives slowly, like a tide rolling in, and for the longest time I didn't even realize it was happening. Admiration is safe. Respect is comfortable. Even brotherhood has a language the world accepts. But love doesn't ask for permission. It creeps in quietly, disguising itself as care, as loyalty, as laughter shared in the middle of the night. And then one day, it unmasks itself and leaves you breathless. With Jimin, the first real turning point wasn't a grand cinematic moment. It was something small, so small it might sound ordinary if I just tell it to you. But it's often the smallest details that reveal the deepest truth. We were practicing late one night, long after the rest of the members had gone home. My body was aching, my voice was tired, but I refused to stop. That stubborn part of me, the part that wanted to prove myself, no matter the cost, was pushing me past reason. Jimin stayed, even though he didn't need to. He sat quietly in the corner, watching. At one point, I messed up a move and fell hard onto the floor. My frustration boiled over. I slammed my fist against the wood and shouted something I can't even remember. And then there was silence. I expected him to laugh, or maybe scold me, or tell me to rest. But instead, he crossed the room, knelt down, and simply put his hand on my shoulder. "You don't need to hurt yourself to be worthy," he whispered. I don't know why, but those words undid me. I felt tears sting my eyes, not from pain, but from the weight of being seen so clearly. Nobody had ever said that to me before. Worthiness had always been tied to perfection, to effort, to proving I could meet the impossible standard. But Jimin, in that moment, told me something revolutionary, that my worth wasn't dependent on how hard I pushed myself. It was intrinsic. That was the first time I realized I wasn't just looking at Jimin as a friend. I was looking at him as someone who could rewrite the story I told myself about who I was. And that kind of power, that kind of intimacy doesn't happen often. But turning points aren't always tender. Some of them come wrapped in pain. There was another night, in another city, when the stress between us boiled over. I had been short with him, snapping over something unimportant. He snapped back. The argument escalated. Words flew sharper than we intended. And then came the silence, the kind of silence that feels like a chasm opening between you. I went to my room, slammed the door, and told myself I didn't care. But lying in bed, the truth hit me. The reason it hurt so much wasn't because we fought, but because I couldn't stand the thought of losing him. That realization was terrifying. It meant that Jimin wasn't just a friend, wasn't just family, he was something I couldn't live without. And that dependency scared me. The next day, I avoided him, embarrassed by my own emotions. But Jimin, being Jimin, didn't let it linger. He found me, pulled me aside, and said quietly, "We can fight, but don't ever shut me out." That one sentence broke down the wall I was trying so hard to build, because it told me that he wasn't afraid of conflict, he wasn't afraid of my flaws, he just didn't want to lose the connection we had. From then on, I started paying closer attention to his laughter, which always rang a little louder when it was just the two of us, to the way he noticed the tiniest changes in my mood, to the way his hand would linger on my shoulder, a fraction longer than necessary, as if grounding me. And slowly I began to see that my happiest moments weren't the concerts or the awards, but the quiet spaces where it was just Jimin and me existing without performance. One morning, I caught myself smiling at nothing, only to realize I was thinking of him. And that's when I knew. The truth wasn't something I had chosen. It had chosen me. But truth has consequences. Admitting it even silently to myself changed everything. It made me hyper aware of his presence, of how much I depended on his approval, his comfort, his voice. It made me vulnerable in ways I had never allowed myself to be. And vulnerability for someone like me was terrifying. Still, I couldn't ignore it anymore. Every practice, every tour, every late night talk became another thread in a bond I knew was unbreakable. And yet, I kept asking myself, what will happen if I speak this truth out loud? Will it shatter everything we've built? Will it ruin the fragile balance we've kept all these years? That's why I stayed silent for so long. Because sometimes love feels like a risk you're not ready to take. But silence isn't safety. Silence is slow suffocation. And so here I am, finally saying it not to Jimin first, but to you. Because Maybe saying it here in this space where I'm allowed to be raw and unfiltered is the first step towards saying it where it matters most. The truth about Jimin is this: he didn't just become part of my life. He became the lens through which I see myself, the mirror that reflects not just who I am, but who I want to be. And once you've experienced that kind of connection, you can never go back to pretending it's ordinary. In the next part, I'll tell you about the moments that tested this truth, the storms we had to walk through, the doubts that threatened to undo us, and the surprising ways love sometimes hides inside pain. Because love is never just laughter and comfort. It's also the courage to face what you fear most, losing the person you can't imagine life without. Storms have a way of revealing the foundation of any bond. It's easy to smile when the skies are clear, when the crowds are cheering, when everything is running smoothly. But when the rain falls, when the schedule grinds your body into exhaustion, when whispers from the outside world seep into your private thoughts, that's when you learn whether your connection was built on sand or on stone. With Jimin and me, there were storms, many of them. And every time I learned something new about what we were to each other. The hardest period came during one of the busiest years of our lives. We were constantly moving city to city, stage to stage, barely enough time to sleep, let alone breathe. Tension builds quietly in that kind of environment, like pressure inside a sealed container. You don't notice it until it explodes. And when it finally did, it was between us. I was frustrated, angry at the pace, angry at myself for never feeling like I was enough, angry at the weight of expectations I didn't know how to carry. And in that state, Jimin became the easiest target. I snapped at him for things that weren't his fault. A misstep in rehearsal, a comment that I misinterpreted, even just his silence when I wanted reassurance. Looking back, it wasn't Jimin I was fighting, it was myself. But at the time, all I saw was him. One night, after a long rehearsal, the fight spilled over into something bigger. I raised my voice at him in front of others. The look on his face when I did, that's something I still regret. It wasn't anger I saw, it was hurt. He didn't yell back. He just nodded slightly, turned away, and carried on. And somehow, that silence cut deeper than any words could have. For days, we barely spoke. The distance between us was unbearable, like a constant ache in my chest. On stage, we performed as if nothing had happened, but backstage, there was a wall. Every time I caught his eyes, he looked away. And the truth is, I hated myself more with each passing day. Finally, one night, I couldn't take it anymore. I went to his room. He didn't say anything at first, just looked at me, waiting. I broke down. I told him everything I had been holding in. The fear of failure, the pressure of always being perfect Jungkook, the way I sometimes felt like I was drowning in expectations. My voice cracked, my hands shook, and for once, I wasn't trying to be strong. Jimin listened. He always listened. And when I finally ran out of words, he said something I'll never forget. I don't need you to be perfect. I need you to be real. If real means you're tired, then be tired. If real means you're angry, then be angry. Just don't push me away. That was the turning point. Because in that moment, I realized that storms don't destroy bonds if both people choose to stay. They reveal the strength of the bond. And Jimin, he stayed, always. But not every storm was caused by us. Some came from the outside world. Rumors, speculation, criticism, people constantly trying to define our relationship, label it, twist it. There were times I wondered if the world's gaze would eventually break us. Would we start to believe what others said instead of what we knew to be true? Would we let the noise drown out the quiet truth we carried? Jimin, as always, grounded me. He reminded me that people only see fragments, and fragments can never tell the whole story. Let them guess, he once said with a small smile. They'll never know the way we know. That reassurance carried me through more nights than I can count. Still, the fear lingered, because the deeper the bond, the scarier the thought of losing it. And love, whether you name it friendship, brotherhood, or something more, always comes with that fear. But Jimin had this way of facing fear with courage. Whenever I pulled back, he leaned closer. Whenever I hesitated, he held steady. And maybe that's the deepest truth of all. The storms didn't break us. They revealed us. They showed me that Jimin wasn't just someone I loved when things were easy. He was someone I couldn't imagine life without when everything was falling apart. That's why I say the truth about Jimin isn't about labels. It's about survival. About finding someone who becomes your anchor when the waves are crashing. about realizing that no matter how much noise the world makes, the quiet bond between two people can still be stronger. In the next part, I'll tell you about the silence, the strange, powerful kind that isn't absence, but presence. The kind of silence that speaks louder than words, and the kind of silence through which I understood Jimin more deeply than I ever could through conversation. Because sometimes love doesn't arrive in the shouting or the storms. It arrives in the quiet, silence. Most people think of it as emptiness, as absence, as something awkward to be filled. But with Jimin, silence has never been empty. It has been full of meaning, full of connection, full of truths we didn't need to speak out loud. If part 4 was about storms, then this part is about what comes after the calm. The quiet where the world finally fades away, and all that's left is the presence of another person sitting beside you. There's one night I always go back to in my memory. It wasn't dramatic. There were no cameras, no stages, no audience. Just the two of us on a rooftop after practice. The city lights glowing beneath us, the night air cool against our skin. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. Jimin leaned back, eyes on the sky, and I did the same. Hours passed that way, silence, but not loneliness. And in that silence, I felt understood in a way that words could never capture. That's the thing about Jimin. He doesn't always demand conversation. He doesn't need to fill every gap with noise. Instead, he knows when presence is enough. Sometimes he'll just sit in the same room, headphones in, doing his own thing, while I'm writing or practicing quietly. And yet, even without speaking, I feel comforted, because silence with Jimin isn't distance, it's connection. One of the truths I've learned is that the deepest bonds aren't always the loudest. They don't always announce themselves in dramatic declarations. They live in the pauses, in the spaces between words, in the unspoken glances across a crowded room. With Jimin, I could always tell what he was feeling, by the way. His shoulders rose and fell, by the way. His eyes softened or tightened by the smallest shifts in his breathing. He didn't need to say he was worried about me. I could feel it. And I didn't need to say I trusted him. He already knew. There was a time during rehearsals when I lost my voice, completely gone. Frustration consumed me. I wanted to scream, but nothing came out. That night, Jimin came to my room. He didn't offer advice, didn't try to fix it. He just sat down on the floor beside me and stayed there. Hours passed. At one point, I looked at him, desperate to say something, but no words would come. And yet, in his gaze, I found every word I needed. I'm here. You're not alone. You're enough even without your voice. That silence healed me more than any medicine. But silence isn't always peaceful. Sometimes it's heavy. Sometimes it's the silence after an argument when words have cut too deep. And yet, even in those silences, I learned something important about us. Because even when we weren't speaking, the bond didn't disappear. It was still there, humming beneath the surface, waiting for us to return. That's how I knew it was real, because even in silence, we couldn't escape each other. Fans often see the laughter, the inside jokes, the way we tease each other on stage. And yes, that's real too. But the truth, the deeper truth, is that what defines us isn't the noise of laughter or the spark of arguments. It's the quiet. The moments when nothing needs to be said, and yet everything is understood. Silence has a way of stripping everything down. No performances, no roles, no expectations, just two people breathing the same air, sharing the same space. And with Jimin, those silences were never empty. They were sacred. I think about one particular memory often. We were flying home after a long stretch abroad. Everyone else was asleep on the plane. Jimin sat by the window, head tilted against the glass, eyes half closed. I sat beside him, headphones in, music playing faintly. For hours, we didn't speak, but I glanced at him occasionally, and once I caught him looking back at me with the faintest smile. No words, just that. And it was enough, more than enough. The truth about Jimin is that he taught me the language of silence. He showed me that love, whatever you choose to call it, doesn't always need to be shouted. Sometimes it lives in the quiet. And when you find someone you can share silence with comfortably, that's when you know you found something rare. In the next part, I'll take you into the moments of revelation, the times when Jimin's words, simple and unexpected, cracked me open and changed me forever. Because while silence holds power, sometimes one sentence, spoken at the right moment, can shift the entire direction of your life. If silence has its own language, then words, when they finally come, can be like lightning. They strike quickly, unexpectedly, and leave a mark you can never erase. With Jimin, it has always been like that. He isn't someone who wastes words. He doesn't speak just to fill the air. But when he chooses to speak, it's because he has something true to say. And those truths have changed me more than I can count. Still, the fear lingered, because the deeper the bond, the scarier the thought of losing it. And love, whether you name it friendship, brotherhood, or something more, always comes with that fear. But Jimin had this way of facing fear with courage. Whenever I pulled back, he leaned closer. Whenever I hesitated, he held steady. And maybe that's the deepest truth of all. The storms didn't break us. They revealed us. They showed me that Jimin wasn't just someone I loved when things were easy. He was someone I couldn't imagine life without when everything was falling apart. That's why I say the truth about Jimin isn't about labels. It's about survival. About finding someone who becomes your anchor when the waves are crashing. About realizing that no matter how much noise the world makes, the quiet bond between two people can still be stronger. In the next part, I'll tell you about the silence, the strange, powerful kind that isn't absence, but presence. The kind of silence that speaks louder than words, and the kind of silence through which I understood Jimin more deeply than I ever could through conversation. Because sometimes, love doesn't arrive in the shouting or the storms. It arrives in the quiet, silence. Most people think of it as emptiness, as absence, as something awkward to be filled. But with Jimin, silence has never been empty. It has been full of meaning, full of connection, full of truths we didn't need to speak out loud. If part 4 was about storms, then this part is about what comes after the calm. The quiet where the world finally fades away and all that's left is the presence of another person sitting beside you. There's one night I always go back to in my memory. It wasn't dramatic. There were no cameras, no stages, no audience, just the two of us on the rooftop after practice, the city lights glowing beneath us, the night air cool against our skin. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. Jimin leaned back, eyes on the sky, and I did the same. Hours passed that way. Silence, but not loneliness. And in that silence, I felt understood in a way that words could never capture. That's the thing about Jimin. He doesn't always demand conversation. He doesn't need to fill every gap with noise. Instead, he knows when presence is enough. Sometimes he'll just sit in the same room, headphones in, doing his own thing, while I'm writing or practicing quietly. And yet, even without speaking, I feel comforted because silence with Jimin isn't distance, it's connection. One of the truths I've learned is that the deepest bonds aren't always the loudest. They don't always announce themselves in dramatic declarations. They live in the pauses, in the spaces between words, in the unspoken glances across a crowded room. With Jimin, I could always tell what he was feeling by the way his shoulders rose and fell, by the way his eyes softened or tightened, by the smallest shifts in his breathing. He didn't need to say he was worried about me. I could feel it. And I didn't need to say I trusted him. He already knew. There was a time during rehearsals when I lost my voice, completely gone. Frustration consumed me. I wanted to scream, but nothing came out. That night, Jimin came to my room. He didn't offer advice, didn't try to fix it. He just sat down on the floor beside me and stayed there. Hours passed. At one point, I looked at him, desperate to say something, but no words would come. And yet, in his gaze, I found every word I needed. I'm here. You're not alone. You're enough, even without your voice. That silence healed me more than any medicine. But silence isn't always peaceful. Sometimes it's heavy. Sometimes it's the silence after an argument, when words have cut too deep. And yet, even in those silences, I learned something important about us. Because even when we weren't speaking, the bond didn't disappear. It was still there, humming beneath the surface, waiting for us to return. That's how I knew it was real, because even in silence, we couldn't escape each other. Fans often see the laughter, the inside jokes, the way we tease each other on stage. And yes, that's real too. But the deeper truth is that what defines us isn't the noise of laughter or the spark of arguments. It's the quiet. The moments when nothing needs to be said, and yet everything is understood. Silence has a way of stripping everything down. No performances, no roles, no expectations. Just two people, breathing the same air, sharing the same space. And with Jimin, those silences were never empty. They were sacred. I think about one particular memory often. We were flying home after a long stretch abroad. Everyone else was asleep on the plane. Jimin sat by the window, head tilted against the glass, eyes half closed. I sat beside him, headphones in, music playing faintly. For hours, we didn't speak, but I glanced at him occasionally, and once I caught him looking back at me with the faintest smile. No words, just that, and it was enough, more than enough. The truth about Jimin is that he taught me the language of silence. He showed me that love, whatever you choose to call it, doesn't always need to be shouted. Sometimes it lives in the quiet. And when you find someone you can share silence with comfortably, that's when you know you found something rare. In the next part, I'll take you into the moments of revelation, the times when Jimin's words, simple and unexpected, cracked me open and changed me forever. Because while silence holds power, sometimes one sentence, spoken at the right moment, can shift the entire direction of your life. If silence has its own language, then words, when they finally come, can be like lightning. They strike quickly, unexpectedly, and leave a mark you can never erase. With Jimin, it has always been like that. He isn't someone who wastes words. He doesn't speak just to fill the air. But when he chooses to speak, it's because he has something true to say. And those truths have changed me more than I can count. One of the first times I felt this deeply was during a rehearsal when I was pushing myself too hard. My body was on the edge of collapse, but I refused to stop. Jimin pulled me aside and said quietly, "If you break yourself chasing perfection, you won't be here to enjoy the music." Simple words, but they cut through the fog of my obsession like a blade. I realized in that moment that my value wasn't in being flawless, it was in being present, alive, connected. He reminded me that the gift of music is meaningless if it costs you your soul. Then there was the night I told you about earlier, when he caught me scrolling through endless comments online, drowning in criticism I couldn't seem to escape. I'll never forget what he said. "If you measure yourself by strangers, you'll become a stranger to yourself." That single line has stayed with me all these years, because he was right. If you let the world define you, you lose the one voice that matters most, your own. Jimin has this gift of turning experiences into lessons. Where others see only problems, he sees metaphors. Like the day we were sorting food donations, and he picked up a can with a torn label. He looked at it and said, "This is how people are. Sometimes the most valuable things are hidden under damage." It seemed casual, almost offhand, but I remember freezing in that moment, realizing he wasn't just talking about the can, he was talking about me, about himself, about everyone who carries scars and yet still holds immense worth inside. It's those kinds of moments that built the foundation of my love for him. Because love, I've learned, isn't built on grand gestures or dramatic confessions. It's built on small truths, spoken consistently, that reshape how you see the world. And Jimin gave me those truths over and over again. But the words that shook me the most came in a moment of weakness. We had been arguing, my temper sharp, his patience thinning. I said things I didn't mean, words fueled by exhaustion and insecurity. When I finally fell silent, ashamed of myself, I expected him to lash out. Instead, he looked at me with tears in his eyes and said, "I don't want to win against you. I want to win with you." That one sentence changed everything, because it showed me that even in conflict, he wasn't my opponent. He was my partner. He wasn't trying to break me down. He was trying to build something with me, even when it was hard. And that, to me, is the definition of love. Over the years, his words have become my compass. Whenever I lose direction, I go back to them. Be real, not perfect. Don't measure yourself by strangers. Even damaged things hold value. I don't want to win against you. I want to win with you. They're simple, but they carry the weight of someone who doesn't just speak. He lives his words. The truth about Jimin is that his wisdom doesn't come from books or speeches. It comes from who he chooses to be every single day. And that's why his words hit so hard, because they're backed by action. He doesn't just tell me to be present, he lives with presence. He doesn't just say that love is about daily choices. He proves it in the way he shows up again and again. I sometimes wonder how different I would be without those sentences echoing in my head. Would I still be chasing perfection until I collapsed? Would I still let strangers define my worth? Would I still mistake conflicts for competition instead of partnership? I don't know. What I do know is that Jimin's words didn't just change my choices, they changed me. And that's why I'm sharing this truth with you now. Because maybe you need to hear the same things I once needed to hear. Maybe you need someone to remind you that perfection isn't the goal, that your worth isn't determined by strangers, that your scars don't erase your value, and that real love is about winning together, not against each other. In the next part, I'll tell you about the moments of joy, the laughter, the mischief, the childlike freedom that Jimin brought into my life. Because love isn't only about storms and lessons, it's also about the rare gift of someone who makes you feel alive, who makes you laugh, even when the world feels heavy. And with Jimin, those moments were countless. Love, in whatever form it arrives, is not only about survival through storms or healing through silence, it is also about joy. The kind of joy that sneaks up on you, that bursts out in unexpected laughter, that makes the hardest days a little lighter simply because of the presence of one person. With Jimin, that joy has always been there, bright, mischievous, contagious. If you've ever watched him laugh, you know what I mean. His laughter isn't just sound, it's an atmosphere. It fills the room, disarms tension, makes you forget for a moment the weight of the world pressing down on your shoulders. I can't count the number of times his laughter has saved me from my own seriousness, pulling me out of my head and back into life. There was a night after a particularly grueling rehearsal when everyone was too exhausted to speak. We sat in silence, drained. Then Jimin suddenly made a ridiculous face at me, eyes crossed, lips puckered, a perfect mockery of how serious I had looked moments earlier. I tried to hold back, but within seconds I was doubled over, laughing so hard I couldn't breathe. That one stupid face broke through hours of exhaustion. And the truth is, those moments matter as much as the serious ones. Because joy is also a kind of medicine. Sometimes the joy was subtle, like the way he'd hum softly while waiting backstage. Not a song for performance, just a tune that lived in his chest. Or the way he'd sneak snacks to me when he knew I hadn't eaten properly, smirking like it was a secret mission. Or the way he'd clap his hands when he found something funny, completely unguarded, reminding me that we were still just two boys who loved to laugh, no matter how heavy the world became. Other times, the joy was wild, unstoppable, like the time we danced together in the middle of an empty street at 2 a.m., music blasting from a phone, speaker, no cameras, no audience, just us. I still remember how free I felt that night. Not Jungkook the idol, not Jimin the performer, just two people laughing until our voices cracked, spinning under the streetlights as if the whole world belonged to us. That night was joy in its purest form. What I've learned is that joy isn't something you can manufacture. It's either there or it isn't. And with Jimin, it has always been there. Even in the hardest times, he has a way of finding light. He'll make a joke in the middle of chaos. He'll smile when everyone else is frowning. He'll dance just for the fun of it, not for perfection. And every time he reminds me that life isn't only about the struggle, it's also about the laughter you share along the way. But joy, like love, comes with vulnerability, because the moments that make you laugh the hardest also leave you missing someone the most when they're not there. And I'll admit, there were days when the absence of his laughter felt heavier than any silence. That's when I realized how deeply it had become part of me, how much I depended on it without even knowing. The truth about Jimin is that he didn't just challenge me, heal me, or teach me. He also reminded me to play, to laugh, to live as if the present moment mattered more than the endless goals ahead. And in a life where I've often been consumed by perfection and pressure, that reminder was priceless. There's a phrase he once said to me after a long day: happiness doesn't come after success, it's what makes success worth it. At the time, I laughed it off, but looking back, I realized he was right. His joy didn't come after we achieved something big. It was woven into the daily fabric of life. And because of him, I learned that joy isn't a reward, it's a choice, a practice, something you create and share in the small, ordinary moments. In the next part, I'll take you into the vulnerability of longing, the moments when joy turned into ache, when laughter gave way to silence, when I realized that love isn't only about presence, but also about the fear of absence. Because with Jimin, the brighter the joy, the sharper the ache when it wasn't there. And that ache is also part of the truth I need to share with you. Every light casts a shadow, and every joy carries an ache. With Jimin, the brighter the laughter, the sharper the longing whenever he wasn't there. That's the paradox of love, of deep connection. The more alive someone makes you feel, the more unbearable it is to imagine life without them. There were times when schedules pulled us apart, different projects, different commitments, different countries. People think we're always together, but the truth is, there were long stretches when days, even weeks, passed without us sharing more than a passing glance. And in those spaces of absence, I learned just how much his presence anchored me. I remember one flight vividly. I was traveling alone for a project, surrounded by strangers, the cabin buzzing with conversations. And yet, I felt utterly alone. I caught myself reaching for my phone, wanting to text him, just to hear something simple. "You're doing fine." That night, I realized how deeply my sense of peace had become tied to him. Not because I couldn't stand on my own, but because life felt heavier when he wasn't beside me. Absence teaches you things presence never can. It shows you what you take for granted. It forces you to notice the small rituals that become invisible when someone is always around, the way he hums when he's happy, the way he unconsciously adjusts my jacket before we step outside, the way his laughter makes a room feel warmer. Only when those things were missing did I understand how much they mattered. But longing isn't just about physical distance. Sometimes it happens even when someone is right beside you. There were nights when Jimin sat across from me, smiling, laughing with others, and yet I felt the ache of everything I wasn't saying out loud. The unspoken truth pressed against my chest. I love you more than I can admit. That longing was heavier than any absence, because it meant I was both close to him and far away at the same time. The truth about Jimin is that he became the measure of my longing. I didn't just miss him when he was gone, I missed him even in the moments I couldn't fully reach him, when fear kept me silent, when love had to disguise itself as friendship. And that kind of longing leaves a permanent mark. There were nights I lay awake, imagining the worst. What if one day he walks away? What if fame, or distance, or life itself pulls us apart? The thought terrified me, because I knew that losing him wouldn't just mean losing a friend. It would mean losing the part of myself that only exists in his presence. But longing isn't only about fear, it's also about gratitude, because every ache reminded me that I had something worth missing, something worth holding on to. And when we reunited after long absences, the joy was magnified. The hug lasted longer. The smile felt brighter. The silence was deeper. Longing carved out the space in which joy could return with even greater force. Still, I can't deny the ache. The truth about Jimin is that he made me understand both the beauty and the pain of longing. He showed me that love isn't only about the warmth of presence, it's also about the sharpness of absence, the ache that proves how deeply you care. And maybe that's why I'm speaking now, because silence has been my way of coping with longing. But longing, unspoken, can eat you alive. I don't want it to anymore. In the next part, I'll share the confession of fear and hope, the private moments when I admitted to myself what Jimin truly meant to me, and the fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, he felt the same. Because longing always carries a question. Do they feel it too? And the truth is, I have spent years quietly asking that question in my heart. Fear and hope, two emotions that don't seem like they should exist together, but somehow when it comes to Jimin, they always have fear of losing him. Hope of being seen by him, fear of speaking the truth, hope that the truth will set me free. For years, I lived caught between those two currents, pulled back and forth by them, never daring to choose one. The fear was simple. What if telling him ruins everything? Our bond has always been fragile in its own way. Fragile not because it was weak, but because it was precious. Something the world watched, speculated on, twisted into their own narratives. One wrong move, one misplaced words, and it felt like everything could shatter, and I couldn't risk that. Not when he was the one person who felt irreplaceable. But hope was louder than I ever admitted, even to myself. Hope whispered that maybe he already knew, that maybe the way his eyes softened when they met mine wasn't just friendship, that maybe the late night talks that stretched until sunrise meant as much to him as they did to me, that maybe beneath all the silence and laughter, he was carrying the same truth I was. There was one night that stands out. We had finished a concert, the adrenaline still buzzing in our veins. The others had gone to sleep, but Jimin and I stayed awake, sitting on the floor of the hotel balcony, wrapped in blankets against the cold. We didn't talk much at first, just shared the silence, the city lights flickering below. Then, out of nowhere, he said softly, "Do you ever feel like the stage is the only place people really see us, and everywhere else we disappear?" I looked at him, the vulnerability in his voice pulling me in. I wanted to answer honestly. I wanted to say, "No, you see me. You always see me." But the words caught in my throat. Fear pinned them down. So instead, I just nodded. And in that moment, hope and fear collided inside me. Because part of me believed he was reaching for the same truth, but another part was too afraid to risk confirming it. That's what love does when you hide it. It builds pressure. Pressure that grows heavier with every unsaid word, every stolen glance, every moment when you feel the truth burning in your chest but keep it locked away. And yet, even in that heaviness, there was beauty. Because hope kept me alive. Hope told me that maybe one day, when the timing was right, the truth wouldn't break us. It would set us free. I don't know when exactly I admitted it to myself. Maybe it was that night on the balcony. Maybe it was earlier in the way his laughter became my favorite sound, or the way his silence felt safer than anyone else's words. But at some point, I stopped pretending it was just friendship. I admitted to myself that I loved him, that I had always loved him. The fear didn't disappear when I admitted it, it grew sharper. But so did the hope, because once you name love, even in the privacy of your own heart, it becomes something you can't unsee. Every moment with him became a question. Does he feel it too? And the truth is, I don't know. I don't know if Jimin ever felt the same, or if what I saw in his eyes was just a reflection of my own longing. But I do know this. Whether he did or didn't, it doesn't change what he gave me. He gave me the courage to feel, the strength to grow, the joy of being fully alive in someone else's presence. And that is love, whether it's returned in the same way or not. That's the confession I've carried in silence for years. And now, saying it here, I feel both the weight and the release. Because love doesn't always need to be claimed or confirmed. Sometimes, love is simply truth and the courage to live with it openly. The truth about Jimin is that he became the center of my fear and my hope. And even if the world never understands it, even if he never says it back, that truth has shaped me more than anything else in my life. In the final part, I'll tell you about what all of this has taught me, not just about Jimin, not just about love, but about life itself. Because carrying this truth has been both the hardest and the most beautiful thing I've ever done. And if there's one lesson I want you to take from my story, it's this. Love, in any form, is never wasted. We've walked through storms together. We've sat in silence together. We've laughed until our stomachs hurt, and we've argued until our voices shook. I've carried the fear of losing him and the hope of being fully seen by him. And now, at the end of this story, there's one truth I want to leave you with. Love, in any form, is never wasted. The truth about Jimin isn't just about him, it's about me. About the person I became because of him. About the way he held up a mirror and forced me to see not only my strengths, but my flaws. About the way he challenged me to be honest when all I wanted was to hide. About the way his laughter taught me that life isn't just about survival, it's about joy. About the way his absence reminded me to never take presence for granted. About the way his words rewrote the story I was telling myself about what it means to be enough. And if there's anything I've learned, it's this. We don't always get to choose when or how love comes into our lives. It arrives unexpectedly, sometimes inconveniently, often quietly. It doesn't wait for you to be ready. It doesn't ask if the timing is right. It simply arrives. And once it does, you are never the same. For years, I was afraid to admit this truth because I thought it might ruin something fragile. But what I've realized is that hiding the truth doesn't protect you, it only suffocates you. The truth doesn't weaken bonds, it strengthens them, even when it's difficult. Because love, even unspoken, has the power to transform you from the inside out. The truth about Jimin is that he showed me the kind of connection that goes beyond labels, beyond categories, beyond what the world expects. He showed me that relationships aren't about being perfect or fitting into neat definitions. They're about presence, about showing up for each other again and again, in big ways and small, about daring to be real even when it's messy. And maybe that's the message I want to leave you with, not just as someone who lived this story, but as someone who knows there are people listening right now who are carrying their own truths in silence. Maybe you're afraid to admit what someone means to you. Maybe you've convinced yourself that it's safer to keep it inside. I understand that. I lived that. But here's what I know now. Love kept in silence still shapes you, but love spoken aloud can set you free. So, if you take anything from my story, let it be this. Don't wait forever to tell the truth about the people who changed you. Don't let fear steal the words you wish you had said. Whether it's a friend, a family member, a partner, or someone you secretly love, tell them. Because one day you'll realize that the only regrets that matter aren't about what you did, they're about what you never said. As for me, the truth about Jimin is simple. He was, and still is, the most defining relationship of my life. Not because of fame, not because of music, not because of circumstance, but because he showed me that I could be fully myself and still be loved. He showed me that love isn't about being completed by someone else, it's about becoming a better version of yourself because of them. And that's why I'm ready to share it with you here, now. Because some truths deserve to be spoken. Some truths are too heavy to carry alone. And this truth, the truth about Jimin, is the one I needed to set free. To Jimin, if you ever hear this, thank you for the storms, for the silence, for the laughter, for the longing, for being the person who changed me in ways the world will never fully see. You are, without question, the most important truth I've ever known. And to all of you listening, don't be afraid of your truth. Don't be afraid of your love. However it shows up, however complicated it feels, because love, when it's real, is never wasted. This is the end of my story, but maybe for you, it's the beginning of yours. Hey everyone, this is Jungkook. Before we start, I want to know where you're listening from. Drop your country in the comments below. I always love reading those messages and seeing how far these words can travel, how they somehow reach people I will probably never meet in person, but still feel deeply connected to. It reminds me that even when we tell the most personal stories, they have the power to resonate with strangers across oceans. And today, I'm about to tell you something I have carried inside me for a long time. Something about Jimin, something real, raw, and unpolished. Something I thought I would never share. Not publicly, not with cameras, not with the entire world watching. But here I am, ready at last,